Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about the power and magic of emotion, explored through the lens of astrology, divination, and art. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, Akashic Records reader, poet, and witch, and I'm here to help you feel your feels. Hi, all. Welcome to Tarot Tuesday, our weekly series where we explore a single card of the tarot. I always weave in oracle cards and shufflemancy, where I pull a song for each episode and pull an oracle card to get some extra context and nuance for you to help you kind of wrap your mind around these cards and to connect with them a little bit more deeply, or maybe in a different way than usual if you are a proficient or schooled tarot practitioner yourself. I add those extra divinatory little kind of bonuses because they're really special for me as someone who has worked with the tarot for several years now and has pretty strong relationships with most of the cards. It's really helpful for me to get like a new angle, I should say, from the support of oracle cards and from shufflemancy. I think I'll be weaving in bibliomancy soon too on each episode, maybe for this one because it feels appropriate with our card of the day. And interestingly, I'm having trouble kind of speaking today. My throat's kind of scratchy. I started like coughing earlier when I was trying to say something to a client and I've felt kind of weird ever since. So you might hear some swallows and some awkward speech. Just bear with me. We're also approaching Mercury's ingress into Taurus, and it's going to form a very fast square with Pluto this week. And so kind of a interesting week in terms of communication and speech, and maybe you're noticing that yourself out there too. I want to make just a couple announcements before we dive into this episode. So I mentioned on my last episode that I was a guest on Amanda Moreno's podcast last week, the Aquarian Spirals podcast. We talked about all things Taurus, and it was very tasty and fun. And that is linked below in the show notes if you want to go check that out. Second, my lowest Patreon tier, my Sun tier, which is $6 a month, is going to be filling up soon. And so if you've been thinking about becoming a patron and you want to get in on the lowest tier, it would be a good idea to do that sooner rather than later because that may fill up probably by summer. So I'd recommend checking that out. The higher tiers still have a little bit of wiggle room. The other tiers for reference, since I don't often spell it out, the Moon tier, all tiers get access to like exclusive content. And so they get Akasha scopes, which are seasonal forecasts for each of the zodiac seasons with a pick card prediction for more personalized insight. And then those are channeled from both the Akashic Records and also the tarot. And then I also do monthly pick a card tarot readings that are voted upon. The topics are voted on by my patrons. And all patrons also get discounts on live readings with me. And then there's also access to my private 4 of Wands podcast, which has like private weekly podcast episodes where I do like archetype exploration and channel messages from particular planets in the solar system. So it's kind of fun and a little bit more out there. At my Moon tier, which is $11 a month, you gain access to our monthly group readings. And our next group reading is actually this Thursday on May 16th. So if you want to practice psychic stuff and divining for others and kind of flex your intuitive muscles and your psychic muscles, it's a really cool space. I really love hosting these, and they tend to be really deep. And I expect that this week's will be deep, considering it's coinciding with this Mercury-Pluto square, which is very deep diving energy. So if you wanted, you could sign up before Thursday at the Moon tier or the Rising tier to gain access to that group reading. It's at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and it's really low pressure, and I try to make it a comfortable and accessible space for people to come and just like listen and receive if they want to, or to participate. At the Rising tier, which is $22 a month. You get monthly tarot readings, monthly recorded readings from me. And so those are predictive by nature. I'll do similar to the way that I do tarot scopes on social media, where I do like a weekly energy or anchor card, a challenge, and a gift for the week ahead. I do that for individuals at the rising tier on Patreon. And so they get those monthly forecasts, and they also have the opportunity to ask a question every month and get bonus insights and answers to their questions. So it's a pretty great deal to get a personal reading and access to all of that other stuff, group readings, and the exclusive content for $22 a month. And you can find the link to become a patron down in the show notes if you're interested. And I think that is my last thing. Let's get into our episode. Okay, so today's card is the King of Swords, and I'm pretty sure this is our first court card appearing in this series so far. And the King of Swords is interesting. I have kind of a weird relationship with this card, so I wasn't entirely surprised to see that it was the first court card to greet us, because this series so far has kind of been like that. We started with the Three of Swords, and it was like, let's just go in. So it feels like I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm not going to take it personally, but I think that they're pressing me a little bit to work with cards that are a bit uncomfortable for me, which is cool. I dig it. I'm here for it. The King of Swords is probably the court card that I have the most challenging relationship with, in that it makes me uncomfortable. And that's in part because I don't have any planets in air signs. The swords are connected to air. The suit of swords is connected to air, which is related to the mind, to the intellect, to communication, to thought, to wit, to mental capacity, and all of this stuff, and learning, and all of the things that you would associate with Mercury. It's a reductive way to say it, but it's pretty accurate. The stuff you'd associate with Mercury is pretty traditionally associated with the sword suit. And so the King of Swords is the final of the court cards. And when I say court cards, what I mean are the face cards in the tarot, where we're looking at a particular person. And so we've got the pages, typically the knights, the queens, and then the kings. And those court cards exist for each of the suits. So swords, cups, wands, pentacles, and each of those suits is connected to an element. And so again, suits air, King of Swords, someone who is quite developed in their mental capacity and their ability to communicate, usually quite effectively. This can be a character who can be a bit detached and super rational and mind over heart often. When the King of Swords is a little bit more shadowy, it might be a figure who is cruel, manipulative, just like really harsh or aloof or unkind, or someone who weaponizes their words and really wields that sword for destruction as opposed to for like to cut through the noise or to get to the truth or to communicate a truth that needs to be communicated. So there's a balance that needs to be struck with swords. And we think about the term like a double-edged sword, or looking at like the Ace of Swords in the tarot. Often it's like you can use this for quote good or for bad. You can wield the sword for justice. You can wield it for injustice. And that really is seen through in the King of Swords, who has reached this throne and who is sitting on a throne of intellect. And so part of the reason that I have a challenging relationship with the King of Swords is that I've experienced the shadowy side of this archetype a lot. I've been on the receiving end of the sort of like scary side of the King of Swords. And so for a long time, that kind of obscured my vision and my relationship with this card. And I had a hard time connecting to it in a way that felt like generative. I would see it and I would get like this ick feeling. And I also had some stuff to work out with air signs that like really impacted my relationship, I think, with the swords in general, and in particular this card being like a more like masculine air sign. That was like a tough archetype of a human for me, and I'm hugely generalizing. But the King of Swords is more traditionally associated with the sign of Gemini. But the air signs for context, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And so King of Swords is a powerful vibe. And when I pulled the oracle card that is corresponding with this card today, it really, like, I exhaled. I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is it. This is what we need to talk about. Because the card is peace. And so where we have the King of Swords, who can be this sort of like intimidating figure, who might be more, again, detached, might at times lack empathy or be cynical and cold and like patriarchal and fall into this manipulative, shady side of the sword suit. There's also this incredible capacity for the King of Swords to wield that sword for justice and to protect the peace. And I think about the term like protect your peace. Well, what do you protect with? You can protect with a sword. You can protect with a boundary. You can protect with your words. And often that's what setting boundaries looks like, is doing King of Swords, is setting a clear boundary. Maybe it's cutting someone off. Maybe it's instituting an ending or articulating a boundary or enforcing a boundary when necessary in order to protect your peace. And also I think about no justice, no peace. Justice is often found or actualized through the sword. Justice is often found through rising up, through rebellion, through violence against one's oppressor. And so there's this whole like both, I think, personal and also collective message that's coming through here about the necessity of at times picking up the sword and wielding it in order to protect and in order to achieve some degree of justice and in turn peace. And so I would invite you to think about a time, maybe recently or in the past or in the more distant past, when you've had to pick up your sword and wield it in order to protect your peace or someone else's, when you've had to be maybe harsh, when you've had to be more emotionally cut off or aloof or detached or whatever in order to protect, and how that felt for you and how you perceive that behavior and that choice now in retrospect when you look back on it. Like, do you judge yourself for the action that you took? Do you see it as necessary? Is there like a good, bad value statement that goes along with it? Like, how does it feel? How does it feel for you in your body and in your mind? Like, what thoughts come through? I ask because I think that everybody has a unique relationship to boundary setting and to specifically this type of vibe, this detached, intellectual, rational, perceiving vibe. Like, where I said it can be kind of activating for me and uncomfortable. For other people, it might be very comfortable. That might be actually like your safe space or something that feels more automatic and natural to you. For me, it's much more comfortable to be in my feels and to like express from my feelings and to make heart-centered choices. It's much less comfortable for me to make like head over heart choices that ultimately honor my heart because it's protecting my heart, but that like require me to make a choice that is not what the softer parts of me are calling for me to do. And so you might have, again, like a totally different feeling from this card. And so I don't want to influence other people's relationship to it one way or the other. I'm just sharing, like, I get uncomfortable and I'm still working through it. And so again, I'm glad that the peace card came out today because it's really reinforcing the necessity of wielding the sword at times in order to be a protector of peace and how that's quite honorable, actually. When I was doing some Googling, I was trying to find some quote that I thought I remembered that was like about protecting your peace or like peace and sword. And so I just Googled peace, sword, quotes. And the only thing that came up prominently was this Matthew 10 quote from the Bible that says, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send or bring peace, but a sword." And apparently this was a Jesus quote. And TBH, I don't have much of the context here, but I thought it was fascinating that Jesus was talking about not bringing peace, but instead bringing a sword. And so I'm not even going to attempt to like pretend to know what this is about or to paraphrase. But it does remind me of the side of Jesus where he's like turning over tables and demanding justice and fighting against iniquity and against injustice. And it calls to mind the way that people have warped and misused Jesus's image to kind of promote like white Christianity and oppression, and to like call out pacification. Long pause because I was trying to think of the word. To claim to be pacifists unless someone is inflicting harm upon the people that they love. And we're obviously seeing a lot of tension around these topics right now as a genocide continues to unfold upon brown people in Palestine. Jesus was a Palestinian. Jesus was a brown Palestinian. He wasn't a white guy with long hair. He was a brown Palestinian Jew. And he, at this moment, would be turning over tables and probably doing a lot more if he were witnessing what was going on and was living at this moment. And so it comes into my noodle that there's a lot to do with how the King of Swords can actually be reintegrated into the heart and seen as like a warrior for justice, and seen as a warrior for love who often has to make the hard but right choices in order to stand up for those who are in need of support, as opposed to striking them down with his sword. And how when we carry the sword, we have a lot of power. We have the ability to turn that upon people who are harming and who are inflicting injustice and who are oppressing people. And we also have the power to turn that around and seize more power for ourselves and to accumulate wealth and to accumulate, coercive power, and to do that through violent and unjust means. And so this week, it's particularly interesting that the King of Swords is coming out, because the King of Swords reversed was actually our anchor card for my weekly tarot scope. And I've also had it come out in like 2 separate readings. And so King of Swords is very, very here right now. And I think it's extra interesting considering, again, this is a Gemini card, and Jupiter is going to be entering Gemini in like just over a week, and that's a big transit. It's ingress into a new sign. Jupiter travels through each zodiac sign for like a year at a time, and so it's leaving Taurus and entering Gemini. And we have Uranus in late degree Taurus, which just formed a conjunction with Jupiter on April 20th, and will be edging into Gemini. And so there's like this buildup that I feel toward Geminian energy, and it almost feels like we're kind of being prepared to enter this intellectual phase, and to do so with a bit more caution and heart. And I think that's why the Peace card is appearing here, because it's this reminder of why we pick up the sword. We pick up the sword so that we can protect our peace or find peace through justice when necessary. And to bring that back down to like a personal level, that again often means setting boundaries with people. That might mean excising someone from your life, or at the very least saying no, or setting clear definitions for how deeply connected you can be to that person, and what they can say and what they can do and where they can go and what they get to know about you. I just posted on Threads the other day about how one personal choice that I made a few years ago was to stop sharing personal info with people who frequently share other people's business with me and are more on like the gossipy side of things, because I am a more private person contrary to what this podcast might suggest. I'm pretty private when it comes to like my deeper heart stuff. And I had 1 to 200 too many incidents where something was shared that was not someone's to share, and it made me feel violated and uncomfortable, and it made me stop sharing with that person. And similarly, I caught onto the pattern that when they gossip to you, they'll eventually gossip about you, typically. And so I stopped sharing with people who frequently brought me information about other people that I really didn't need to know. And that for me has been a really effective and necessary boundary, as has been removing a lot of people from my life who frequently talk shit about other people, or who frequently gossip and get involved in stuff that is not theirs to get involved in, and have that more like kind of nosy energy. No offense if you consider yourself a nosy person. Like, I love getting some delicious tea too when it's like not someone's like personal sensitive information. But there's a line for me, and there's a certain felt discomfort that I have when I receive an overshare from someone, or when I receive information that I'm not meant to hear. And so that, again, for me is a helpful boundary. And that's something that has led to some relationships either like ending, or at least being scaled down in terms of intimacy and what I was willing to share with someone. And on the other hand, when I see that someone is consistently trustworthy and discreet and is able to keep things private and to honor my privacy and other people's privacy, that makes me trust them and want to share with them more. And so we get to like turn the volume up and down on our intimacy and on our level of connection with people based on what they show us through their behavior. And I was contemplating that this week because I had to set a really difficult boundary that I really didn't want to set, but one that was like the right choice for me ultimately. But it brought me back to what I described earlier, which is like, I lean more into the ushy-gushy heart space of making choices from that place, as opposed to making choices like with my head. Like, I'm a more intuitive decision maker and more of like a heart-centered decision maker. But at times that's bit me in the ass when I've hung out in relationships for too long after they were hurting me, or when I have, stayed in places for too long or accepted behavior that was like not okay for me. And so I had to make a choice this week to set a really strong boundary with someone. And it was really hard. It was not easy. It was heartbreaking, actually. And I made it with the knowledge that I might regret it, and that I might like really grieve the intimacy and grieve the connection and grieve even just like the opportunity for having the constancy of that relationship. And it wasn't because of like bad behavior. It was just a heart protective choice that I had to make, because I was going to get very, very hurt if I didn't. And I did a cord removal for myself, cried a lot, which is like a cord cutting, except it's where you actually like remove the cord from your energy body completely instead of severing it. And if you're not familiar with cord cutting, maybe I'll link something below, but it's a process where if you need to end a relationship or you need to cut ties with someone, you can also cut ties with like the energetic cord that exists between the two of you, which creates this sort of constancy of exchange, especially in really deep and intimate relationships. And so when I end a relationship, or when a relationship is ended, when someone else ends it, I will typically, once I feel ready, go through my like grieving process, and then when I feel ready, I'll perform some type of cord cutting or removal. And so I did that today, actually, and that was a King of Swords moment. It was this choice that I knew was right, that I knew I had to do for my well-being, but I had to kind of switch into a mode of detaching from the emotions that it brought up in order to do that. And, I haven't gone through this process quite in this way before. I've done cord cuttings when I've been like angry with people or when I've been like really hurt. But this is one of the first cord cuttings I did where I was like, I felt so much love. And there was just like so much gratitude and love that I felt going into this experience and into this ritual. And it made the whole experience so radically different than cord cuttings of the past because I was like sobbing 5 minutes before as I was like verbally expressing all of this unspoken gratitude for this person and for the way that this relationship has shaped me and my life and my experience of the world and my experience of love and relationships and for like the beauty that this person possesses and has brought into my life. And it was really moving to hear myself say those things out loud and to very authentically express this well of gratitude and love that I have for this person. And it then made it easier for me to go into that ritual from a place of care and forgiveness, even though there wasn't a whole lot of forgiveness that had to be offered. It was just kind of acceptance and like release and hope for this person to flourish and to be well and to be loved and to be happy, and for those same wishes for myself. And going through it from that perspective, as opposed to anger or hostility or resentment or, any sort of like charged emotion, it made the whole experience so much more powerful and easeful for me. And so accessing my heart and then switching into this like heart-centered but mind-oriented, like rational, I don't know. Most people wouldn't consider doing a ritual like this necessarily a rational thing, but I think it's pretty rational. I think it's a rational choice to like cut a tie in this ritualistic way when necessary, when the time has come, and to call back your power and to allow the other person to retrieve and have their energy returned to them. It's a very kind act, actually. But often the way that we perceive cord cutting is through this more like resentful lens because of, I think, a lot of internet stuff that kind of plays up the idea of cord cutting to be this like hostile thing. Anyway, this is a huge tangent, but the point of this tangent is that I really feel this call for us to understand the ways that we can marry our boundaries with our love, and that acts of justice, acts of resistance that may on their surface appear harsh or may appear scary even, at times are coming from a very heart-centered place. A place that desires freedom and justice and love and well-being for self and for other. And so that's the energy that I entered that ritual with, and I think it's the energy that we're seeing from students across the world at this point who are setting up encampments on their college campuses and resisting police violence and this like barrage of violence that they're experiencing from campus police and city police and administrators. And it's an echo, right? Like we've seen this play out historically during radicalizing moments where students are the people who rise up and reject these authoritarian regimes and say no more, and use their own bodies and their own hearts and their own minds and put that all on the line in an act of resistance that is so fucking courageous and so brilliant to witness, and also simultaneously so sad that college students and young people are the ones who often have to be at the front lines. They don't have to be, they just are often the ones who are willing to do it. And who are willing to kind of create that momentum for change. And so I think that, again, is a really beautiful example of conscious and heart-centered King of Swords energy. It's setting the boundary, it's wielding the sword and saying no, and doing so in defense of those who need support and those who need protection, and doing so with the ultimate goal of peace, with the ultimate goal of peace that is preceded by justice. And so I'm really having kind of like a turnaround moment with this card as I speak and as I sit with it, just thinking more and more about like and as I look at the card, this King of Swords has his hand over his heart. And he actually has the Venus symbol over his belly button, like the circle of the Venus glyph is encircling his belly button. And it's not gendered, so their belly button. I want to stop doing that, but it's a hard pattern to break out of sometimes. And so this is really beautiful that we see the Venus glyph on the King of Swords and the King of Swords covering his heart, and how perfect to see this alongside this message around like bringing it back to the heart, bringing it back to the soul, bringing it back to a place of love and acting from that place. Our song of the day is We Will Always Love You by the Avalanches. And the song features Blood Orange. I love Blood Orange, but I always forget Blood Orange's name. So We Will Always Love You. The Avalanches and Blood Orange. This song features a sample from a Smokey Robinson and the Miracles song. I don't know which one, but it goes, since I saw you last, there's been many a sunset, and every day we're apart seems like a week. Oh, but I knew you belonged to him when we first met, but every day we're apart seems like a week. And then it has kind of like these little, I think these are like the Blood Orange little lines that are like splashed into that verse that says, you don't need to break it. Gold is all you see. I don't even understand. And then it goes, draped in monotony. What's my life gotten me? Hard to be glorious when two minds meet in the corner and a story is being told by me to you. Take another hit. What else to do? Think about leaving the house, but my fears aren't letting up. We'll always love you, but that's not my fault. We'll always love you, but that's not the point. It's all our fault every time you hear me pay. We always loved you. And then it ends with this repetition of a single line that goes, nighttime on fire, dreaming of another life. Nighttime on fire, dreaming of another life. We'll always love you, but that's not the point. And so what a like King of Swords line. We'll always love you, but that's not the point. Woo! It's like acknowledging the emotions, but then also recognizing that love is not everything, and that love can be everything, and that love is unfortunately not usually enough. I actually have a poster on my wall that says love is enough. And I like years ago really loved it, and I've come to not love it so much. I keep it because I really like it, has a special significance to me and the artist and the creator of it. But I often look at it and I'm like, it's not actually true. Somewhere, yes, my Venus and Pisces soul is like, love is enough. And that's what that soft, ushy-gushy part of me has long believed. And that belief has gotten me into a lot of trouble and a lot of pain and a lot of lessons and growth too. But ultimately a lot of pain when I said love is enough and love can conquer all. Like love is the thing, love is all you need. Like all these quotes, we get fed all these quotes. And I think that the essence of it is beautiful and the intention is often beautiful, but it misses the point that love is not enough in the face of harm or in the face of violence or in the face of oppression. We need to often do more. We need to say no. We need to rise up. And so while love can be this sort of like center point and the seed and the fire that keeps our passion and our courage burning, it's not by itself the sustaining force that we need in order to heal or in order to liberate. Like we need the sword. And so this line, really stuck out to me as a very King of Swords and even like peace decision here. Like, we'll always love you, but that's not the point. And then the way that the song ends, where it says, nighttime on fire, dreaming of another life, it reminds me of like this sense that there's something else out there, but that's often not the reality that we get to choose for ourselves. Like sometimes we love people, but we have to end those relationships because it's not practical or it's not safe for us or it's just not fulfilling anymore. Sometimes we end up in situations and we can't find our way out of them. Sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes people settle. Sometimes people end up in jobs and relationships and homes and places that they wouldn't really choose for themselves if they were to have the choice again. But it's the reality that they live within, and that's that. And they figure out how to cope and how to like move forward and find as much joy as possible, hopefully. That's not always the trajectory. Sometimes people succumb to the grief of their circumstances and are miserable, and that's reality too. And so there's this sort of like realism that I think comes through in this song, and also this recognition of the yearning and this recognition of the desire, this recognition of the love, but also this pretty clear line that's drawn in the sand, perhaps with a sword. So I will leave you with that. I'm not going to do bibliomancy today because I don't want to select a book. But I appreciate you being here. And if you have any comments or thoughts, or if you want to submit a question for our June Ask Me Anything episode, you can do that in the notes below via the voice message link or the Spotify episode page or my contact form on my website. Those are all good ways to send in questions and comments. And as always, if you do get value from this podcast and enjoy it, I'd really appreciate if you could leave me a 5-star rating and comments if you're on a platform where you can leave comments. It's all super appreciated. I've gotten a few really, really thoughtful DMs recently from listeners that on Instagram that's been really heartwarming. Like, that shit makes my week. So if you want to send me a DM and tell me what you think, I welcome that as a Leo moon person. I love words of affirmation. So I will leave it there. Thank you for rolling with me through kind of like a rambly episode. I hope that if you experience King of Swords reverse moments this week, since that was our anchor again for our weekly forecast, that you're able to come back to your heart, whether you're the King of Swords reversal and you're speaking unkindly or cruelly, or just kind of operating in that airy shadow, or whether it's someone else. I definitely invite you to come back to your heart and also your sword, and to set boundaries where needed, to take time away, to decompress, to be kind to yourself, and to try to recenter in compassion. I love you, and I will talk to you on Friday.